Ah, a keyboard. How quaint. Hi, everybody. Thought I'd start with a Scotty reference that has nothing to do with anything. How are we all? I hope we're all having a good Veterans Day. Of course, not all of us are here to enjoy lovely Veterans Day. Isn't that right, my friend Christopher, who is here? Right.
With the wars they've been sent into the last couple of decades, I guess.
Yeah.
Basically since I was born.
The last little ever.
Yeah, I mean, but we honor the veterans. Or the best thing we can do is to make certain that there's fewer of them, fewer combat
Yeah.
veterans, and we don't put them in harm's way unnecessarily, or to make money for oil profiteers or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what better sentiment to express than on this Veterans Day of all Veterans Days, which is the 100th anniversary of the end of the most tragic and pointless war ever, the First World War, where we sent millions of people into a meat grinder for a purpose that I don't think anybody really even understood that well at the time.
In
And
order to punt the whole issue down the road 25 years.
yeah, yeah. So happy Armistice Day, happy Veterans Day, happy centennial of the end of World War One, and we're missing a host again here, and
Oh yeah,
I would love to know where Pierre is.
oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes he gets upset and you figure he has a point. Sometimes not. He definitely does not have a point this time.
Okay,
Um, Actually, he we were like FaceTiming recently,
right.
a couple of days ago. He is upset with you, and he really doesn't have any right to be. I don't think, but he's upset with you because he tried to get into your last Patreon hangout, and he couldn't.
Okay. Well, he's not a patron.
Exactly. And but he was upset about that. He complained that it was basically, he told me that he felt like you were making him pay money for access to him or to yourself.
But
And
he can DM me or Skype me
yeah,
anytime he wants.
right. And I tried to explain. It's a basically, it's a thank you for the people who are actually financially supporting him.
Right.
That's the whole point of doing that.
Yeah, that's the whole deal.
And he was upset about it. And finally, I said, "Well, what about this show?" And he looked at me and he said, "What about it?" And so I stared at him for a bit, and he's like, "Whatever." And he hung up, or whatever you call it now. They don't actually have to put the telephone handset back on the cradle on the phone on the wall. Uh, so he disconnected, and that was so. So apparently that's why he's not here. He's mad at you because he couldn't get into your Patreon hangout, even though he's not actually a patron.
Well, Pierre, if you're watching, I'm sorry that there was apparently some fundamental misunderstanding as to the nature of the Patreon hangouts. But if you really want in that bad, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to let you in. It's just $1 a month. I mean, if you that's all you can pledge more if you want, but $1 a month is really all you need, and then you can jump into the Patreon hangout every month if you want, bud. We'd be happy to have you.
So would we.
Yes, yes, so would we. It would be nice to get you on a fucking webcam at some point under some circumstances. This isn't going to help.
No, but that's the whole pay for access thing. That was apparently his sticking point, which he doesn't have to pay to access this one.
Yeah.
But
There's a link sitting in his inbox right now that he could click and just jump right on, but nope.
that would require. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
Somewhere with that, and I started that and realized I didn't know where to end it.
Well, now it's over, buddy.
Yeah, I
So,
missed that window.
so
Door is closed.
we decided for this show to do some cutting edge election analysis because technically we're still in, I guess this, well, I guess it depends on how you reckon the weeks. The election was either last week or we're at the very end of election week. I guess it depends. If you
It
consider
was within the last 7
it was
days.
within the last 7 days. So we had our big midterm election here in the United States. Some people say it was a blue wave. Other people are incorrect when they say that it wasn't one. But anyway, let's talk about how did the election results go by as far as you're concerned? How did things go in your neck of the woods? What did you think of the election results? And let's just start there, and then we'll just blather about it for an hour or so, like we usually do.
Yes, insightful white man analysis.
Yes, what the internet needs more of.
Yeah. Overall, I'd have to say I was fairly happy with it. Retaking the House was essential to create some sort of check on Trump's power, since he seems to be unencumbered by any sort of resistance from his own party, no matter how crazy or fascist or illegal what he's trying to do actually is. So getting the Democrats getting back control of the House was vitally important, and they did accomplish that. Getting back the Senate was never going to happen for various reasons, not least of which was that 42 Republican seats weren't even up for election.
Yeah.
So they only had to win 9 seats out of the entire 35 that were up in order to maintain their majority. And we'll get into that in more detail a bit later on. Yeah. Governorships are pretty much even right now. I think it's it's still sort of up in the air right now. I think there's a couple that are officially undecided or whatever, but right now, looking at the governor election results, 50 states, 25 Republicans, 23 Democrats, 2 are not decided at this point. So I mean doesn't get too much more even than that. In my neck of the woods here in Pennsylvania, at least my district, I was happy with how it turned out, because we re-elected Governor Wolf, who was the incumbent. He defeated Scott Wagner, who during the campaign threatened to stomp on Tom Wolf's face with golf spikes, so you can tell he's a typical level-headed Republican. And I'm not making that up. He actually did threaten that.
You know what it is? It's these over-emotional liberals and leftists that are the threat, not these nice, level-headed, reasonable Republicans.
Yes, the violent Muslims are such a danger.
Yes. If they could just control their emotions.
Yeah. In the Senate, Bob Casey, the incumbent, won re-election. Lou Barletta lost, and Lou Barletta, he actually comes from this neck of the woods. He was a representative in the area. He is a typical fantastic Republican in the same sense. Let me just pull this right up from Wikipedia.
Oh boy.
He used to be mayor of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which is here in Luzerne County, a bit south of here. But the third sentence of Lou Barletta's Wikipedia entry says, as mayor, he came to prominence due to a high-profile anti-immigration ordinance that spurred legal challenges and was later found unconstitutional. The legal fees relating to defending the ordinance contributed to making the city financially distressed, and it no longer enforces the ordinance.
So no wonder the Republicans love him.
Yeah, in fact, here, the details of the Illegal Immigration Act, he vowed to make the city, quote, one of the toughest places in the United States, unquote, for illegal immigrants. The ordinance allowed the city to deny a business permit to employers who hired illegal immigrants, and gave the city authority to fine landlords up to $1,000 for leasing to illegal immigrants. The act also made English the official language of Hazleton, prohibiting city employees from translating documents into any language without official authorization. Long story short, it was overruled. The Supreme Court declined to hear the case. The town of Hazleton was ordered to reimburse the ACLU $1.4 million in legal fees.
Yeah, baby.
Which in 2017 was more than 1/10 of the annual revenue of the town, and it was already in debt over $6 million, so they had to take additional loans to pay the fees. And the city is, as of 2017, is declared officially financially distressed. So this is perfect Republicanism. Barletta did this big, high-profile thing that was anti-immigrant, red meat for the base, and it failed, but it also devastated the city financially. But it looked good in boosted him from mayor of Hazleton to the House of Representatives, so it was a big success for him, and that's all he really cared about. And as for the ruins left in his wake, that's the next guy's problem. So you can imagine I was not particularly unhappy when I found out that he had lost the election against Bob Casey. Whenever I saw the signs on the side of the road or people's yards for Lou Barletta, I would add the slogan, because white male racists are underrepresented in Congress.
I mean, is there a bigger and more obvious fucking political grift in this country than fiscal conservatism? I mean, all these Republicans and right-wingers, they run on fiscal conservatism. They say, even if you disagree with us on the social stuff, we should have a fiscal conservative in charge because you want someone who will spend your tax dollars responsibly. And
that would be Democrats.
Yeah, how many times have these guys gotten in office at the local, state, federal level, whatever, and made a massive shit show out of the budget? I mean, it happens every time. The economy is almost always better under Democratic leadership. The last time at the federal level that the federal government had a balanced budget, the president was a Democrat, and we haven't gotten anywhere close since, mostly because the next president was a Republican who spent all the money there was, and even more. Again, fiscal conservatism is like, it is such a phony, disingenuous routine, and people fall for it every time because they say they fall for the bullshit of, well, we need to run the government like a business,
Yeah, that is such a mistake. The governments and businesses are two very different things, and they have very different purposes, and running one like the other is going to result in some very bad effects. A business is there to make profit. A government is not there to make a profit.
No.
Government is there to allow people to live safely.
Well, and that's completely true, and I agree with that 100%. But it has also occurred to me, and I know other people have pointed this out, and you might have even made this point at some point in one of our previous conversations, that in the way that in the specific area of government that is usually being objected to when people bring up, you have to run government like a business, they bring up running up deficits and running up debt, right? That's what businesses do. Businesses can borrow money. That's what the government is doing. They act like, well, if a small business person runs out of money, then they just have to declare bankruptcy and the business is dead. No, they can borrow money. That's what everybody does. So this whole idea of, well, you can't spend more money than you have, really? Because I'm pretty sure that's the basis for our entire fucking economy at this point.
Yeah, only the government can't declare bankruptcy and cease to exist.
No, it can't. It can't.
So governorship happy with, the Senate I was happy with, and then the local House of Representatives race, the Democrat incumbent Matt Cartwright won over John. It's spelled Chrin, but I understand it's pronounced Schrin, although I really don't know for certain. I understand that he is a New Jersey native who bought a house in the district so that he could run here. So you can imagine that, once again, I wasn't really thrilled to see that he had lost, sort of the same way I wasn't upset when Rick Santorum lost, when it turned out that he owned a house in Pennsylvania but actually lived elsewhere and his kids attended school elsewhere. He was just pretending to live in Pennsylvania so he could be the senator here. Yeah. So,
which one is the Santorum place? Oh, it's that one with the stuffed full mailbox and all the newspapers piled up on the front porch. That's the Santorum place.
I understand that a reporter came up to the house at one point that he supposedly lived in Pennsylvania and peeked in, and there was no sign that anyone was living there. In fact, I'm not even sure there was furniture inside. I forget how the story
went. Just a vacant house.
There might have been basically it's a vacant house, and he reported that. And Santorum honestly responded by filing a trespassing charge with the police.
That's perfect.
Unauthorized people were going onto his property.
Oh,
that's
God.
how he responded.
I don't want people to see how I live. Not that that's an issue because I don't live there, but it's the principle of the thing.
So anyway, that's how Pennsylvania turned out. So basically, all the elections that I was able to vote in, the results were basically what I was hoping for. I understand that did not exactly hold true for you in Maryland.
I didn't get anything I wanted. No, it didn't.
You did some things you wanted.
I did. I got a few things. We did get a a Democratic representative in Congress again, thanks to our
House.
in the House, yeah, thanks to our shamelessly gerrymandered district. So I have very mixed feelings about that. But hey, a Democrat is a Democrat, so for the moment I'll take it. They're probably going to have to redraw the district lines before the next election. The court basically said that congressional map ain't too good, Maryland. And Maryland was like, okay, sorry. So, I mean, and that's fair, I have to admit. I mean, as much as I like having a Democrat as my member of Congress, this is an extremely red part of the state. And, you know, the majority opinion of the fucking dipshits and numbskulls around here would be to elect a Republican. So that's only fair. But for the moment, I will enjoy the spoils of gerrymandering and my Democratic congressman.
So Maryland's having the opposite problem of North Carolina, where like the votes are 50-50, but there's like 13 districts, and only
Yeah.
3 of them are Democrats, even though it's a 50-50 split.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing, and this gets into another problem with Maryland, though, because yeah, I mean, my congressional district is just ridiculously gerrymandered. They basically took a big chunk of a southern part of the state, like just to the south of what our district used to be, and grafted it on to our congressional district, so there'd be enough Democratic votes to have a Democratic member of Congress. And that's not right. But the problem with Maryland goes beyond just my district, right? Because I can say like, well, it's these dipshit Republicans around here who don't know what's good for anybody, and they'll vote for Republicans, and it doesn't matter if Trump's in office or if they want to cut all the benefits or whatever. Like that's all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just pulled up the you're in Maryland District 8,
yeah.
Jamie Raskin.
Oh no, that's not no.
No?
I'm right now. It's John Delaney, and in January it'll be David Trone. I think it's district.
David Trone. All right,
Yeah.
there it is. All right, that one doesn't look nearly as figured you were in District 8 when you're talking about how gerrymandered is, because it's in the north, but it avoids Frederick completely, and then it has like a razor thin connection, and then it goes down into Rockville. And
Yeah.
down
There are a couple of districts in this
Oh
state
geez,
that are.
yeah, District
are-
2. Yeah, oh wow, yeah,
Yeah.
This is a gerrymandered. This is very clearly gerrymandered.
Yeah.
When you have things like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it kind of takes a dip. Or like, we need some Democrats. Yeah, so that's Maryland. But the problem isn't just that kind of thing, and I can't blame all of our problems on the dipshit Republicans who live in this state, in my area, in Western Maryland and in Southern Maryland, near the shore. Those are sort of the Republican right wing strongholds of Maryland. Which, other than that, in the center is largely a very blue state. When you get toward Baltimore and D.C., it's extremely Democratic and has been for a very, very long time. But the problem is that there are a large number of Maryland Democrats who are really, in terms of the way they vote, are no better than Republicans, because they're centrists, they're moderates, which is great if nothing's at stake. Like, if nothing's at stake and your vote is like, I'm gonna demonstrate how open-minded and independent I am, and even though I'm a Democrat, I'm gonna vote for a Republican. If nothing's at stake, you know what? Go ahead, make yourself feel good. But if we're in the era that we're living in right now, and you're a Democrat and you're voting for a Republican for any reason, fuck you. You are a bad person, and I hope something bad happens to you. We here in Maryland, in this blue state, have reelected a Republican governor because Democrats voted for the motherfucker. Not only did Democrats vote for him, but Democrats, including Democrats in elected offices, endorsed him. Our state comptroller, who is a Democrat, who was just reelected to that office on election day, did not endorse the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, endorsed the Republican incumbent. I cannot fathom, I don't understand why that would happen under normal circumstances. In this day and age, with the Republican Party taking such a shameless, dangerous, hard right turn, I cannot fathom what goes through a Democrat's mind when they say, I know what I'll do. I'll endorse the Republican. And our Democratic candidate was really, really good this time. It was Ben Jealous, former head of the NAACP, a great activist background. Plus, he's an entrepreneur. He was a venture capitalist. So that should keep the fucking centrists happy because he's not anti-business. He was a terrific candidate. And he got murdered. He got trounced because all these fucking centrist Democrats, they said, no, I'm going to vote for the Republican.
Let's look at the numbers. He got 56.2%. Larry Hogan did. Ben Jealous got 42.8%. So it was like a 4-to-3 ratio there.
And honestly, that wound up being closer than a lot of people thought it was going to be.
Does Larry Hogan have incriminating photos or something?
Here's what Larry Hogan does. Fuck Larry Hogan, by the way. I wouldn't vote for Larry Hogan if somebody put a gun to my head. If I voted for Larry Hogan, I'd have to immediately cut that hand off.
Is that one where you'd actually might prefer the Libertarian candidate to Larry Hogan?
I don't think I would vote for a Libertarian, but I'll tell you what I did do this time that I haven't done for a long time. Not in the governor's race, because I definitely voted for Jealous and was very proud to. But in my state senator race and my state delegate race, both of whom were Republicans and both of whom won re-election. They were not opposed by Democrats. There were no Democrats on the ballot for either of those races. There were, however, Green Party candidates on the ballot. And what the fuck does it say about the state of the Democratic Party in this state when the fucking Green Party runs somebody, but the Democratic Party, the other major political party in this country and the party that has mostly controlled this state for generations can't find two people in this area to run, but the Green Party puts candidates up. So I did vote for the Green Party in those two races because I'll be goddamned if I. This was the state delegates race and the state senators race.
Right.
It was the state senators were.
State races.
Yeah, state races. Yeah, the state delegate is Neil Parrott, and the state senator is I can't think of the guy's name now.
Oh, Neil Parrott.
Parrott. Yeah,
I've heard you say all sorts of glowing things about him.
Neil Parrott. Neil Parrott is one of those people that I can't imagine ever looking at the newspaper in the morning and seeing a headline. Just imagine the most grotesque thing possible. If it happened to Neil Parrott, there's no way I would feel bad about it. I'd be like, I would just be like, oh, really? Huh? Because he's a horrible human being. He got elected during a year when it came out that he had once proposed that HIV positive people should be tattooed to identify them, for public safety. We elected him.
Yeah. But Republicans find it very offensive when you compare them to Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. We should tattoo the HIV positive people, but we're definitely not Nazis at all. So, of course, people voted for him anyway. Actually, I shouldn't say they voted for him anyway. A lot of these fucking sick fucks around here probably voted for him because of that. Because I can't stress enough how much I loathe the right-wingers that live in my area. And when they say their fucking prayers at night, they should thank God that they live in a democratic state that is willing to drag them along and fucking hold their asses up. Because that's what happens. That's the only reason why things are halfway decent in this part of the state, because we're in a democratic state that spends money on infrastructure. And if it was up to them, we would be not much different than West Virginia, which is a nice little place if you happen to be in a nice small town, but you get, 3 miles outside of town, and it's like you're in pioneer days. You might get ate by a bear, as I imagine they say. I don't know if they actually say that.
There are regions where in the United States, in West Virginia, Alabama, here in Pennsylvania even, where you'll take pictures of neighborhoods and you look at and you think it would be like the slums of the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
Where you see houses that clearly, they haven't been re-roofed or re-sided in 50 years.
Yeah.
They're just thrown together with spit and baling wire and prayer.
There are areas of West Virginia. Yeah, there are areas of West Virginia that are within a 15-minute drive of where I sit right now, where you drive through just lovely little towns that are just beautiful, like Shepherdstown, which is a college town, which is the main reason why it's so nice, because there's educated people that live there.
And money comes in.
Yeah, and money comes in, yeah, because the longtime West Virginia Senator Robert Byrd made sure to pour all the money he could into Shepherd University because they named all the buildings after him, and he was like, I like that. And he was a Democrat. I have to give him. He was a Democrat. Not exactly my idea of an ideal Democrat. He was one of the old, like 50 years ago, he was super racist, and then he decided he wasn't going to be that way anymore. But he still kind of was. But
so he improved, but not enough.
He improved, but not enough. Yeah, but there's you drive through lovely little towns in West Virginia that are just how charming, right? And then you get 5 minutes out, and it's like something out of the Grapes of Wrath. It's like shanties made out of corrugated tin. And I don't blame those people, obviously, because they're probably just struggling to get by with whatever they have. But I mean, it's like, why aren't we helping? Like they're like 5 minutes outside of a city where it seems like things are at least better than this, and then it's like, and they're drinking from a well. You know, they have to go out in the winter with a bucket and prime the well if they want to take a bath and cook their food. Why is this? Why does this happen? We like it that way, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that's how things went in my state. I got a Democratic representative thanks to a gerrymandered district that isn't going to probably last past the next election, and other than that, it was nothing but Republicans because my area of Maryland sucks and Democrats in my state suck.
Yeah, I had not realized that Maryland was gerrymandered as much as it was, because I haven't heard nearly as much about that one as I have about the Carolinas. But
yeah,
it's the gerrymander. I mean, you think with gerrymandering that the percentages would be near like 50%. You know, that the whole point is to get you just enough to get the edge.
Right.
But looking at these districts, I mean, the district you're in looks like the only one that didn't get 60% of the vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
These crazy districts. I mean, District 6, you're at 57%. District 8, 67, 76, 66, 70. I mean, they may be gerrymandered, but they are heavily, heavily Democrat. And then the one district that's Republican is only 60% for the Republican, and that one doesn't look all that gerrymandered for the most part because it's the whole section that borders Delaware.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of the blame has to rest with the shape of our state, because Maryland itself looks like it was gerrymandered. Like,
yeah,
that can't be the way they meant for it to look, right? I mean, you have the natural southern border, which is the river. Okay, so you can't really fault that. They stopped at the river and they said, okay, you expect that to look a little weird, but then it goes up and over and then down again, and then because we had to cut out Delaware because Delaware wanted to be its own state, so we had to cut Delaware out. But we said we're not giving you the whole coast, Delaware. We're keeping some of it for ourselves.
And there's that region where the interstate goes through, where it's so narrow that the westbound lanes are in Pennsylvania and the eastbound lanes are in West Virginia.
Yes. Yeah, it's
so
yeah.
You really can't do much about that district. I mean, it sort of is what it is.
Yeah, but
still, but when you have a district that's the same population as all the others, and there's no region that's more than 5 miles wide because it's so gerrymandered. Yeah, there's a problem with. Hadn't realized Maryland was that bad.
Yeah, I support fixing the districts, even though it's almost certainly means I will lose my Democratic member of Congress. At least I will still probably have 2 Democratic senators, unless we really fucking throw common sense out the window.
Which in this day and age is very much a legitimate concern.
Yeah, that's true.
Although your senator did win with 64% of the vote against 31 to the Republican candidate.
Yeah. Cardin, I think, will be there for a while.
3.7% for Neil Simon, the independent.
I thought he was dead.
I think it's spelled differently. It's N-E-A-L.
Yeah, that's a different guy.
Yeah. But since we're talking gerrymandering, I guess we'll talk about some of the complaints I've seen about the Senate election overall.
Ah, yes, you put up I thought was a very good Facebook post about this, where you pointed out the foolishness of complaining about gerrymandering when it comes to Senate races, right?
Yeah. So we did, and there's a couple of different places, sites that have similar maps, but we found one to pull up here, and basically, it's the Senate election results. The Republicans kept the majority, which was, say, a little disappointing, but not at all unexpected. And here we go. The main thing here, and when I did my post, one of the people who had been concerned about, or who had posted something complaining about this, had defended themselves because they saying they weren't quite meaning what I had said. But I saw a lot of different people made comments on this, and there are a number of different arguments. And what most of the people seem to focus on here was the fact that if you look at the totals, it's 51 Republican, 46 Democrat, and 3 still undecided. But you look at the vote totals, and Democrats got like 40, nearly 48 million votes, and Republicans only got 34. So the Democrats had like 57% of the votes.
Yeah.
But the Republicans still have the majority in Congress. And so people were complaining about this. So I felt the need to post about this because I thought there were a couple problems with the complaints. That I thought the Democrats actually did very well in this Senate race, even though they did lose 2 seats so far, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple points I made. First of all, I did see at least one person complain that it was gerrymandered. You cannot gerrymander the Senate because it doesn't have voting districts that change. It's static. It's the state borders, and
Right.
Every state gets 2 senators. You cannot gerrymander that. The only way to change the Senate boundaries is to actually redefine the borders of the states, which is not something that's ever going to happen. Also, as far as those vote totals go, not all 100 seats in the Senate were up for election. Only 35 were, the normal 33 plus 2 special elections. And of the 35, there were 26 Democratic seats that were up for election, or up for re-election, and only 9 that were held by Republicans. So basically 3/4 of the seats, the Democrats were playing defense. They had to win 3/4 of the seats just to end up where they started. So that's 74% of the seats were being defended by Democrats, and only 57% of the votes were cast for Democrats. So if the Democrats had matched that up, they would have won 20 seats out of the 35 that were up for election, and they've done much better than that. So Democrats who are complaining that the election results were unfair or undemocratic, it's actually Democrats are benefiting from the very issue these people are complaining about, because that was 57% of the votes, but 70% of the seats have gone to Democrats. But those numbers, those totals, are basically irrelevant, because the thing about the Senate, when you complain about disproportionate representation over those votes, the fact is that's how the Senate is supposed to work by design. And this is something I went over in the Facebook post. We have a bicameral federal legislature. There's 2 houses. There's the House of Representatives and the Senate. Because when they were writing the Constitution, the large states felt that their concerns should be weighted accordingly because there are a lot more people affected by it. And small states didn't want their needs and concerns to be, washed out or ignored because of the larger states.
Right.
And they were both making valid points. So we have 2 houses. The Senate gives each state equal representation, and the House gives each voter equal representation, more or less. If we can go into details on that if you want, but more or less that was the intention. So the Senate is never intended to represent every voter equally. It's intended to represent every state equally. If there was one state that had 100 million people and one that only had 10,000, they're going to have 2 senators each, regardless of the population, and that is the intention.
Well, yeah, and what a lot of people might not realize, unless you are a student of American history, and even a lot of students of American history don't realize this because it was changed relatively early. Originally, people didn't even vote directly for senators. The senators of a state were appointed by the governor. And it wasn't until there was a constitutional amendment to revise that, and I think it was the 1820s or the 1830s. I think it was somewhere in that region where
it was somewhere early on. I don't remember.
Where
honestly don't remember.
People would vote to elect their senators, but before that, it was because the senator was considered a representative of the state. they were appointed rather than elected by popular vote. So the fact that we have as much control over who is our senator or who are our senators as we do is a little different than what the founders intended. Not that I think anybody should have a problem with that, but
No.
yeah, they
Well,
are.
the founders also, I don't think that they had set up a government with the intention of political parties existing or the concept of that, because the original setup was also the number one electoral vote getter would, the one who won the most electoral votes would be president, the one who finished second would be vice president.
Right.
Which makes sense until you consider that they might be from different parties and absolutely despise each other and work against each other.
Right.
Which I think is eventually what happened.
Yeah, what happened. I mean, it didn't happen so much with in the first couple of administrations, but yeah, you would think. I mean, political parties did exist back then. George Washington, in his farewell address, said, "Hey, political parties are not a good idea." And we said, "Thanks for your service, Mr. President," and completely ignored everything he said.
And here we are today.
Yeah. But yeah, that's another thing where it's like, we tend to lionize the founders and think of them as these figures chiseled out of marble, and they're just these wise people who descended from the mountaintop, and they had some, they
declared that slaves are 3/5 of a person at the same time.
They institution.
That's middle ground for you. That's middle ground. You got to find middle ground. And one side says black people are equal, and some people say black people aren't even human. You can compromise if they're 3/5 of human.
Right. Hey, that's mostly human. That's 60% human. That's progress.
That's majority. Yes.
They're a majority human. And they only did that so they could count them. Just think about that. They only gave them 60% humanity so they could count them in the census for representation purposes.
Yeah, it wasn't really concern for them. It was concern for the states.
Yeah.
For the House.
Yeah, and the sick part of that was the people who wanted that were the people in the South, because they thought, well, we'll count them as people if it means we have more political power, but for no other reason. So, yeah, but anyway, so the founders made some pretty obvious errors right away that needed to be addressed. And in some cases were addressed relatively soon, like the vice president thing and the Senate thing. And in other cases were addressed superficially, but haven't really been addressed substantially yet. Like the whole slavery thing and the institutionalized inequality that we still have as a result of it. So,
well, you'll still hear people say, though, slavery is illegal and nothing is holding people back.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Because that's how that works, right?
But they're also the same sort of people who will say the most incredibly racist things, but then declare that they're not racist because they never said. They'll dance around certain issues. They will defend Trump on everything, but then say, "Well, I never said I supported him."
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
I don't back up his racist policies.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely want to build the border wall. Don't get me wrong. I definitely think that illegal immigrants are an existential threat to our society, but don't lump me in with Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They've learned that if they very carefully don't explicitly make certain statements, and they can say, "I never said that." Just that everything you said supports it, but you never actually came out and said it.
Yeah, yeah, they're smart enough to know that there are certain things that they can only come out and say when they're in private with just each other.
Yeah.
I think we've seen enough examples to know that that's exactly what they do.
I hate certain Republican members of this administration with terrible fake hair and a lot of failed businesses in their past, but I never said it was Trump.
Yeah. Don't put words in my mouth. Okay.
Yeah. But,
yeah.
But as far as the Senate issue goes, again, Democrats lost some seats in the Senate, which was pretty much a given. But if it makes you feel better, in the next two elections, in 2020 and 2022, Republicans have to defend 21 seats in each elections, and Democrats only have to defend 11 and then 12. So basically, they're going to be the Republicans are going to be playing defense 2-1 over the next two elections. And the next senatorial election, the next major election is 2020, which is also a presidential election, which is when Democrats and liberals actually bother to show up at the voting booth, which they tend not to do in other elections. So, that's a good sign for that point for checking Republicans' power here and trying to get people into place who will, in 2020 that they will start. Isn't it in 2020 the governors who win in that election or in place at that point help determine the boundaries for the House, the district boundaries, and for the census and so on.
Yeah, they do that every 10 years for
So the 2020 election will be a very important one on that front as well, as far as determining congressional boundaries and districting and gerrymandering issues for the House, but again, not the Senate. So that is the election where I think if there is a blue wave, that's where it's going to be much more obvious, because it does not look like a blue wave when Democrats lose 2 seats, even though they were defending 26,
right,
and only had the opportunity to win 9.
Yeah, and look, I want to acknowledge that I do think it is legitimate for people to feel disappointed who were expecting more, right? Because I was disappointed that we didn't take the Senate. But as you have correctly pointed out, I think that was a long shot anyway. It was possible, but it was an extreme long shot. And I don't think anybody realistically expected it to happen. Even if things went really, really like unexpectedly well for the Democrats, that was still a long shot.
Right, because if they won 3/4 of the 35 seats that were up for election, they would have ended up right where they started.
Right. Yeah, they basically had to run the table in the Senate to take back what would have been a very, very razor-thin majority, which would still be a majority, would still be certainly better. I mean, +1 Democrat is better than plus anything Republican. But yeah, that was never realistically going to happen. But of course, that's what I had hoped would happen. Just as I had hoped that my Democratic governor candidate would win, even though that was really realistically never a possibility. None of the polls had him anywhere close.
The Texas race hurts.
The Texas race hurts, yeah, because it wound up not being super close. I think Cruz won by 3% when everything was said and done.
Looking at it now, it's 50.9 to 48.3, so that's like 2.5–3%.
Yeah, so it's not like it's close, but it's still a clear result. It's not like it was decided by 10,000 votes or something.
Not like frickin' Florida every goddamn election. What was that one thing that somebody posted that honestly, Floridans could be it could be a choice between ice cream and puppies and kicks to the head, and it'll be 50.1 to 49.9.
Yeah, at this point, whenever they offer a vacation to Florida on The Price is Right, I assume those contestants must have done something horrible and they just didn't tell us about it. Like, why would you do that to good people? You don't that a vacation to Florida is not an enticement. That's a threat. That's like, look, we will send you to Florida. You will stay there for 6 nights.
You will not be allowed to leave.
You will. I mean,
we will charge you taxes for it.
Why would anybody?
As far as the overall results go, I didn't mean to change.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I understand the disappointment that people feel, because I felt it myself. But this was a good result. I mean, I am something of a hard ass on this. I don't accept any excuses for anybody voting Republican at any level for any reason. So anytime any Republican wins any election, I think that is bad news, and it disappoints me greatly. So I can understand people thinking that, well, it wasn't a blue wave because they wanted a blue tsunami. They wanted it to just sweep in and just carry all the Republicans out to sea to drown, as they all deserve to. And I completely 100% mean that. I swear to fucking God. But that didn't happen. But that was never going to happen. Mostly because I was being metaphorical just now. There wasn't ever going to be a tsunami. But yeah, we got the House back. That's good. That's really good.
That gives them subpoena power over Trump.
Absolutely. Now that come January, when the new Congress is seated, there will be at least one chamber of our national legislature that has the ability, and it seems the willingness to investigate this administration for real, not just play act at it, as has been done for the most part up till now by the congressional committees.
For Trump, for Kavanaugh, for everyone. It's like,
yeah,
we'll put on a show and then go with the preordained decision.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully we will see some forward progress in that come January. And that's good news. That's really good news. I personally would have liked it if it looked like someone else other than Nancy Pelosi was going to be the speaker. It looks like she's going to be the pick to be the speaker. And that's fine. I'm not like against that, but it would have been nice to sort of turn the page, and be like, okay, we're going to have a new generation of leadership. We're going to move to the future. Doesn't look like that's going to happen this time. Nancy Pelosi is fine. It would have been nice to have someone else, but whatever. All in all, it's good news. It's a good result. We're better off now than we were before the election. So I think we need to sort of take a moment and pat ourselves on the back for just a second before we get back to work, because I think this was overall a good result, despite the disappointments. And there are, and even if you don't think that this was a blue wave, there are so many individual races where things did go our way, and in some cases unexpectedly, like Scott Walker losing the governor's race in Wisconsin, which is fantastic. It is fantastic. Scott Walker was maybe, with the possible exception of Abbott in Texas, Scott Walker was the worst governor in this country. An absolute nightmare. Wisconsin used to be a stronghold of organized labor, of social progress. He has absolutely destroyed Wisconsin. He's turned it completely upside down. So to have that guy lose his office is such good news. Even if the rest of it hadn't come our way, that would be something we're celebrating.
And one of the things that came out of that election that made a lot of the news was that when Scott Walker as governor narrowed the margin of victory that you're allowed to demand a recount on to 1%,
yes.
And then lost by 1.2. If he hadn't passed this rule to try to block people from recounting against him, he would be in a position to demand a recount of this election, but he can't because he made a much smaller margin, and he now falls inside the old one, but not inside the new one. So he kind of burned himself here a little bit on that, and I'm quite all right with that.
Yeah, how delicious is that? And how revealing is it to see Republicans in Florida suing to stop all the votes from being counted? If there has ever been a more obvious tell for how corrupt and crooked and dishonest this party is, they are trying to stop a legally mandated recount. Because they know they don't know. They'll probably, recounts rarely overturn results, so they'll probably end up winning anyway. But there's a realistic chance that the recount will end up with them on the wrong end of it. So instead of saying, let's count all the votes and respect the will of the voters, they're saying, no, we won, stop counting.
Yeah. When you are taking the position of, we're the party of democracy, also we don't want to count all the votes, some cognitive dissonance there.
We don't want you to vote, and we don't want to count the votes if you do happen to vote.
Yeah, but as far as what you're saying about the blue wave, again, the Senate Democrats were never going to win that. They've lost 2 seats out of 100 so far in the Senate, which was what most people were actually kind of expecting to happen, to be honest. But as far as the other races go, like in the House, there were, everyone in the House is up for election every 2 years. There's 435 races. Democrats gained 32 seats in the House. As far as state governorships go, looking at it, says 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans were not up for election. So that was even. So that was 36 governorships were up for election. And Democrats gained seven governorships out of 36.
Yeah.
That is a huge result.
That is, and what was it? Only 28% of the candidates that Trump endorsed actually won.
Oh yeah,
which is a worse record for endorsements than Pence or Biden or Sanders or Obama. They all endorsed multiple candidates at various levels. They all had a better winning percentage among their endorsements than Trump. Trump had the worst winning percentage among endorsements of major national political figures.
you almost, to do worse than that, you almost have to try to do worse. You have to go into California and say, I'm expecting the Republican to win governor, or the Democrat in Texas. You know,
Yeah, you have to try.
it's like expecting, in Manhattan, I think the arch conservative is going to win. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
You sure about that? You don't want to change that?
there's a fine line between endorsements and just pipe dreams
Yeah.
in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Although
So
not that it makes a difference to Trump because he invents his own reality moment to moment. I mean, he came out the next day and took credit for what he ludicrously declared to be an almost total victory.
you know, the thing is, the scary thing is that people actually take what Trump says as gospel. They actually believe it, and there's like no fact checking that they do on it. And he makes stuff up, and they believe it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've said before, I'll say again, Trump in and of himself is not the problem because the whole system is set up so that there should be checks on him, and that people should be saying, look, this man is delusional. He shouldn't be in this position. And the problem is all the Republicans who are stepping up and propping him up simply because he's a Republican candidate or the Republican president. So, gaining the Democrats gaining the House is extremely important because apparently Republicans have no intention of doing anything about Trump or the very questionable or sometimes outright illegal things that he is suggesting or proposing. He was talking about an executive order to overturn birthright citizenship, which
Yeah.
is explicitly in the Constitution. And Republicans are lining up behind him like, that's a good idea. Well, not all of them. Some of them who are not running for re-election
Right.
and therefore have the courage to actually, face reality from time to time.
Well, the
have
rhetorical
come out
courage.
against it.
The rhetorical courage.
Right. Rhetorical courage, because when it actually mattered, they didn't say anything. So,
Yeah.
so the problem is how much of government is simply lining up behind him simply because he has the R next to his name for Republican. So gaining the House is the importance of that is hard to overstate for a midterm election.
It's a big deal. Think about this. If nothing else, the Republicans in the Senate will have a much more difficult time, hopefully an impossible time, getting any legislation passed. Because you're not, hopefully they're not going to get anything through a democratically controlled Congress. And if they do, hopefully there is hell to pay for any Democrat that votes their way come 2 more years.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that Democrats will actually have the courage in the Senate to require a 60% vote on everything the way that Republicans did when Obama was president? Because something came up in my timeline recently about how like a bill to help a job authorization act for veterans failed by winning 58-40 because Republicans demanded 60 votes for anything. So 58-40 in favor of did not get passed. If Republicans are trying to pull much more horrific stuff than jobs for veterans here on Veterans Day, perhaps Democrats could try to require maybe 60 votes for things like deporting people or putting children in cages in the desert. Just a thought.
It would be nice. Yeah, I mean, the frustrating thing, and look, I'm a registered Democrat. I vote Democrat. I think the Democratic Party is it's the Babylon 5 of our country. It's the last best hope. It's not perfect, has a lot of problems, but it's basically all we have. So let's all get on board and try to make it work the best we can.
We have a choice between a questionable party or an openly evil party.
Yeah, exactly.
Honest, the Republicans are now openly evil.
Yeah, there's no, and there's no, as I said earlier, there is no excuse for supporting the Republican Party at any level, and I'm not accepting excuses for that from anyone. I don't care what you think your reasoning is. I don't accept it. You're making the wrong decision. And we're probably not going to be friends. I'm at that point. But what frustrates me is that there are so many people on our side who still don't seem to grasp that those are the stakes and that is the nature of the game being played. I don't know if you watched Saturday Night Live last night, but I watched it this morning because I watched it the next day on Hulu. I don't know why I watch it because I hate it. But
Well, that's been your TV watching habits have fallen into that particular category for quite
I,
some time.
I always,
I remember the days of you talking about all the stuff on Trinity Broadcast Network on an almost daily basis.
yes, that's true. That's true. Oh God, I made a I made a comment in a video a couple weeks ago, I think. And I can't remember if I left it in or if I edited it out, but it was I know I said during the recording, I said something like, if you're blah blah blah, and if that's what you think, I don't understand why you're still watching this video, because I've never understood why people hate watch things, and that's not true, because the biggest example is I watch Saturday Night Live every week, and I hate it. I think it's one of the worst things on TV, and it just makes me angry. But I watch it every Sunday morning when it comes up on Hulu. And they did a thing, and the thing is, like, I like a lot of the people on it. Some of the performers are just great. It's just that their material is fucking dog shit. But as you can, and look at how many funny people have come out of that show and done really great stuff. Just very rarely on the show, because the show is terrible. But
can we make the analogy, Saturday Night Live and the Republican Party? They're both terrible things that exist only because of inertia.
Yes, exactly. Because NBC just doesn't bother to cancel it. They're just like,
because they existed before, so they exist now.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's unfortunately the case, I feel, for a lot of the cities in like this region, like Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton, and Scranton. They exist now because they existed in the past.
And we got to have it, right? We can't just get rid of it.
It's not one of those things where anything that brought them into existence, like Wilkes-Barre exists primarily because of coal mining. This was a huge mining region, and the geniuses who were in charge at one point started following an especially rich vein in violation of the rules up underneath the Susquehanna River, and surprise, surprise, they got too close. The weight of the river caved in, and a number of miners died, and the mines all flooded. It flowed into the mines for like 2 or 3 days. There was a whirlpool on the Susquehanna River as the water flowed in.
Whew.
And that was the end of coal mining, because it's all underwater now. You go down there, you dig in, and the river flows in, because they didn't follow the safety rules that, because we all know that under the libertarian ideal, businesses will be rational and intelligent and self-regulate. Number one, so, but the mining towns were here, and so they continue to exist because they were built here already, but there's no particular reason for them to go forward, unfortunately. They exist because they did previously.
Yeah, exactly, and
that's also why the Susquehanna River is like pure poison, because the river flows through the mines. You get the acid mine runoff.
Jesus,
it's endless.
And why clean up the river? It's been poisoned for so long. It's part of our heritage. Well, and
protect the pollution, because it's our heritage.
It's old. It's our pollution. Damn it! We
need to put the steel mills back in Pittsburgh and get our pollution back.
But so. Saturday Night Live, there was a segment last night that was a response to something that they did last week. Well, one of my favorite people on Saturday Night Live right now is Pete Davidson. Whenever they allow him to do his own thing, when he gets to do like a desk piece on Weekend Update that he writes himself, he always just kills me. He's hilarious. And he did a bit last week where he made fun of politicians, and one of the politicians he made fun of was this guy Dan Crenshaw, who was elected to Congress, who is a veteran, and he lost an eye I think it was in Afghanistan, and he wears an eye patch, and Pete Davidson made a joke about him referencing the eye patch. He said he looks like a hitman in a porno movie. And okay, I laughed at it, but I understand why people might be upset, because you make fun of the guy for whatever reason, but you making fun of him.
You want to make fun of him for his choices, not for physical.
Maybe making fun of a veteran who lost his eye in a war zone isn't the best thing. So I completely get why people were upset by it. And Pete came out this week and apologized, and he said, and made some fun of it. He said, I know this was a great shock to anybody who knows me, but I made a poor choice last week, which I thought was hilarious. But then they had the actual guy come out, Crenshaw, who is a Republican. Dan Crenshaw comes out and they do a desk piece together. And Crenshaw, he tells a few jokes, at the expense of Pete, and to sort of get him back and even the score. And he accepts Pete's apology and gives a nice compliment to Pete Davidson's father, because for anybody who didn't know, Pete Davidson's father was actually killed in 9/11. And so Representative Crenshaw said something nice about Pete Davidson's father, which was classy. But then they had to do this fucking let's all come together and look past our differences bullshit, which I say again, Dan Crenshaw is a Republican. And if you go to his campaign website, he wants to take away a woman's right to have an abortion. He wants to fuck public education. He is anti-immigrant. He's pro-gun. I'm sorry that he got made fun of for his eye. That shouldn't have happened. But fuck Dan Crenshaw. And if he wants to extend his hand across the aisle to people, the first thing he has to do is talk to the rest of his party to convince them to stop trying to fucking kill people. And stop supporting policies that kill people himself. I don't get this whole, well, we all have to unify. Again, in times when there's not so much at stake and when one of the sides isn't fucking genocidal, okay, let's all try to work together. Let's find common ground. But when one side is running Nazis, and even if they're not running Nazis, they're fucking carrying water for them, and that's one side of the divide, no. God damn it. We can't, how do you find common ground with people that want to build concentration camps for immigrants? They want to take away an immigrant's legal right to request asylum. Like, how do you find common ground with those people? How do you find common ground with people who want to take away civil rights protections for trans people? What's the compromise there? What is gained by being nice to those people, by saying, we should all set our differences aside. Yeah, you want to brutally oppress marginalized people. I don't, but let's find something we have in common. I don't get that. So it's too bad that the guy's eye patch got made fun of. But to hell with him. To hell with him. And to hell with this fucking feel-good, let's all hug and sing Kumbaya bullshit when half of the country is trying to kill the other half.
Yeah, because this country, you get the impression there's going to be another civil war at some point in the increasingly immediate future.
Yeah, and it's not going to be avoided by one side laying down, because what's going to happen is if the people on the left just decide to lay down, the people on the right are going to murder them.
Yeah, they're going to stand on top of them.
Yeah, because they don't. Yeah, exactly. They don't want peaceful coexistence in equality. They want dominance. That is what happens when your country approaches fascism. The Republicans don't want to coexist with Democrats. They don't want to compromise with them. They want to run them over. And the fact that there are so many people who still don't seem to fucking get that, it makes me want to put my head through a wall.
There was something I saw on Facebook fairly recently. Somebody had shared a post, and I don't remember who posted it originally. I have no idea, so I apologize for that. They were talking about something that they had asked for some discussion back when, I guess, the bathroom bill was the big news, where trans people are expected to legally use the bathroom that matched their, like, I guess, gender identity at birth, as opposed to what they identified with later.
Yeah.
And said that they had, at the time, had put out there, what do you want? Like, what would your preferred responses be, or what would your, what compromise would you want? What are you looking for out of this? And so they said that they were surprised, even knowing what the attitudes were toward trans people. They were surprised by how viciously and strongly and stridently the response from a huge number of people was very simple. They wanted trans people dead.
Yeah.
They didn't want, when it came to, what bathroom, trans men, do you want them in the men's room, ladies' room, whatever? Their answer was they wanted trans people dead. They didn't have any compromise. They didn't have any decision, this would be better. They simply didn't see them as human, didn't want them alive. They wanted trans people dead, and that was the end of it. And you do not compromise or find common ground with people who want you dead. There is no common ground from there.
No.
If somebody wants you, to die, if somebody questions your right to exist, if somebody doesn't think that you have a right to live because of some characteristic that you have, there is no negotiation or compromise with that person. You cannot find middle ground with that. And there are a lot of people who don't understand that, mainly because they're not part of that demographic or any
Right.
demographic that faces that issue. So you have a lot of middle-class white men saying, well, we can compromise. Well, no, you can't.
No. You can't. You can't compromise any kind of discrimination that is based on a characteristic that a person was born with. And that's the case with trans people. I think a lot of times people are confused because we talk about transitioning, we talk about trans people becoming a different gender, and what's actually happening is they are living out the gender that they have always been. They were just assigned
Right.
the wrong gender at some point, and now they're trying to correct that mistake and live as who they truly are. So it's an inborn characteristic. And anytime you try to discriminate against anyone because of a characteristic that they were born with that is morally neutral. There's nothing good or bad about being a trans person. It's just how people are. There's nothing good or bad about having brown hair. It's just how people are, right? Or the color of your eyes, or your height, or whatever. It's an inborn characteristic that you have no control over. And anytime anybody tries to discriminate on that basis, it should be unacceptable to everybody. It should not be a partisan political issue. It should not be, well, Republicans favor limiting civil rights protections for trans people, but Democrats favor protecting them. Anytime you try to discriminate against anybody for an inborn characteristic, it should set off alarm bells. And it should trigger some very unpleasant associations with our own history and with the history of the world. Because how many dark pages of American history and world history have been written because people decided that it was okay at a government level, at an institutional level, to mistreat or oppress or marginalize or flat out kill people because of some trait they were born with that was determined to be unacceptable. There
Right.
should be not an ounce of compromise with that.
And these are and generally the people who are most violently, aggressively against people who are born with some characteristic. These are the same people who will defend rapists and murderers, and they'll defend Kavanaugh, or they'll
Yeah.
make excuses for people. They'll defend Trump. They'll defend people who make the choice to do evil things, but then they vilify people who are born with a characteristic they don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
And they vote for people who, and that's meat for the base. This bigotry is what much of the Republican Party is founded on these days.
Oh yeah, and the sad part is it works. And that's
God, yes.
that's why
it works endlessly.
that's why there's been hardly a peep about the incoming invasion from the caravan since the election. Before the election, it was everything anybody could talk about. Oh, we got to send troops to the border. We got to seal off the country. The immigrants are coming. Can you imagine Americans, the country of immigrants, the melting pot, and we're supposed to be scared shitless because, oh my God, some immigrants are coming. How fucking pathetic is that?
But in the Dakotas, they wouldn't let Native Americans vote because they didn't have a physical address, so they couldn't prove that Native Americans came from here.
Yeah. They might not legally be allowed. Yeah, because they had and again was a law that's one of how the racists have gotten sneaky, because they can't just be out and out racist anymore. So they have to come up with these little clever side hacks like, well, we can't say we don't want Native Americans to vote, so we'll come up with some circumstance that only they would be affected by, like right. You're not an officially registered voter unless you have a street address, knowing that lots of Native Americans who live on reservations don't have street addresses, they have post office boxes. So we'll just make that requirement to disenfranchise all of them, and we can say, oh no, that law doesn't even mention Native Americans, but everybody right. knows what the fuck is going on. But you can't prove it.
That's the whole, I never said that. Well, you didn't have to. It's clear as day. Just like in Georgia, where they have the election, where the person who has kicked like 1 million people off the voting rolls in his term has, in his other position, is now in the position to, he kicked like 1 million people off the voting rolls. Now he's ahead by 60,000 in the election, and he's in charge of the recount.
Yeah, exactly.
areas with large minority populations, large black populations, there were voting machines that were not even taken out of the original wrapping and put out to
Yeah.
be used for voting purposes, because the Republicans are not the party of ideas. They are the party of vote suppression in order to stay in power.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that the Georgia situation. I mean, I'm glad that it's gotten a lot of attention. The idea of the Secretary of State remaining in office while running in the election that the Secretary of State's office oversees, like that happens. That happens in other states. That's not as unusual as you would hope it would be. But I'm glad it's getting a lot of attention because it seems like the sort of thing that is obviously wrong and should never ever be allowed to happen. I mean,
I
just
really, I really think you should have to surrender your old position to run for a new one.
well, especially if your old position gives you oversight over the election that you're running in. I mean, just think how many more strikeouts Cy Young would have had if he had been allowed to call his own balls and strikes. I mean, he would have had 10,000. Like, you know, he would have set records that could never be reached. I mean, if he now pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies and also home plate umpire, Cy Young. Like that, you know, there's a reason why we don't let that happen.
It's become so brazen and so obvious and so relentless. I shared something recently where somebody on Facebook had shared they had shared a tweet, and they had captioned it, "Siri, sum up 2018 in one tweet," and that tweet was, "Being angry all the time is exhausting and corrosive. Not being angry feels morally irresponsible."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That feels like where we are. That there's this, you can't be angry all the time, but there is so much to be angry about, and it is so obvious and so blatant and so brazen and so shameless. And you hear people defending it, and it's insane. It's this I don't know how to describe the Republican Party beyond words other than evil.
Yeah.
If, like I said recently that I've reached a point where I just think anyone who still supports Trump has white nationalist leanings, because I don't understand. I don't see how any human being could see what he does and the racist things he says and the openly blatant hateful things,
Yeah.
and if you still support him at this point, on some level you have to agree with those things. It's not rational otherwise. You can't be offended by basically everything that he does and still support him. You have to see what he's doing and not be offended by it. And if you're not offended by racism and sexism and transphobia, then you have to on some level be racist and sexist and transphobic. I mean, it feels like basic logic to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there comes a time when principle is translated into action, right? And you can be the type of person, you can wring your hands and cry and bemoan all the terrible things about Trump and how you think it's just a terrible thing for the country and the things he does are so embarrassing, and you can go on and on and on about that, right? But you get no points for that if
Right.
you get in line when he snaps his fingers. That's the whole point. There are people in my family who, you know, are very uncomfortable with the tone, with the rhetoric, with the things he says, with the racism and the bigotry and the sexism and everything. Oh, they just, oh, no, that's just terrible. That's unbecoming of the office. But guess who they vote for? Guess what party they vote for?
Because they agree with it, they're just upset that he's so open about it and he's not putting it in the politically correct terms that they can pretend that it's not racist.
Yeah, and it's like, and you get no points for that. I'm sorry, you get no points for that. Yeah.
And Trump is inciting violence. I mean, the critical things he says about people who disagree with him, about the press, how the press is the enemy, and then we had the whole mail bomb issue where people are starting to act on that rhetoric. You can't pretend that calling people enemies and inciting violence against them is unrelated to actual violence against them. And white nationalists are being given a lot of fuel for their fire. And it's fairly close to home. I actually haven't gotten around to mentioning this yet. The shooting in Pittsburgh in the synagogue.
Yeah.
My sister and brother-in-law are members of that synagogue.
Oh
They
my
weren't there
God.
that day, but they're members of that synagogue.
Oh my God.
So,
I have another friend who knows someone who's a member of that synagogue too. So that's now two people that I know who have a personal connection to that. So
and then Trump came for the photo op, and people are like, "No, go away.
yeah, fuck
You,
you.
you helped cause
This is
this."
partially your fault. Yeah.
But Trump hasn't seen any tragedy that he can't go in and make about himself.
No, no. Which is, I just if you can look at him and your skin doesn't crawl, then I do not understand you on a fundamental level. And if you look at him and he does make your skin crawl, but you can't bring yourself to vote against his party, then I don't understand you. Why would you support a candidate or a party of a candidate that makes your skin crawl, that you can look at and you just know instinctively that he's an evil, disgusting person. He's a malevolent person who doesn't deserve to have any power, let alone most of the power, and you would still support that person or support the political party that empowers and enables that person. I do not understand that.
He horrifies me. I'm going to vote for people who will defend him.
Yeah. Well, what am I going to do? Vote for a Democrat? I had someone in 2016, and I know a lot of people said this, but there was a person in my life, I won't say who it is, but it's relatively close to me and my family, who one of the most morally upstanding people I've ever known, but actually said, yeah, was totally on board with all of the Trump stuff, all of the, yeah, he's disgusting, he's gross, he's bigoted, he's blah, blah, blah. But what am I going to do? Vote for Hillary? Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
this isn't a difficult choice. Yes, motherfucker, you're going to vote for Hillary unless all that stuff you just said about how disgusted you are about Trump is just hot air.
Yeah, people voted for Trump because they didn't like the black man, because they supported the racism, because they hated Hillary more than they loved their own family, because they honestly believed that he was honest when he talked about the things that he was going to do. But none of that holds up. It's just, if you looked at Trump and you actually thought that he was presidential, I mean, there's just, I don't know where you go from there.
No, I don't either. And I mean, you mentioned like people saying, well, they hated Hillary more than they loved their own family, and they hated her for reasons that I have never heard a single person intelligently articulate. Because every reason that anyone on any side of the political spectrum has ever told me why they could not support Hillary Clinton in the general election, every single one of those reasons applied to Donald Trump times 1,000. Like, if your problem with Hillary was, she's too aggressive militarily. Oh, so Trump is a fucking pacifist to you? Oh, she's in the pocket of corporate interests. Oh, so Trump is an independent candidate, right? He's not beholden to any sort of special interest at all. Like, it was complete horseshit. Anybody who was faced in the primaries, I completely get it. In the primaries, if you're a Democrat and you wanted someone other than Hillary, I completely get it. There's lots of reasons to want a candidate other than Hillary. But when Hillary is the Democratic nominee on the ballot and the other choice is Donald Trump, you have no excuse. You have no excuse.
Do you remember women are too emotional and erratic for the office of president?
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, here's my favorite. Do you remember they made such a big deal about Hillary having feeling a little woozy after like a 9/11 memorial, and they said, oh shit, she's probably going to be dead before she takes office. And now this past weekend, Trump canceled his visit to the cemetery on the 100th anniversary of World War I because it was raining.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just, there aren't words.
yeah.
Well, we've done I think that we can safely say we've covered our 5 minutes of Trump and all of this at
yeah,
least.
Yeah, we've interwoven it in.
We'll do a super cut where we just take out the parts of Trump and you can do the 5 minutes of Trump that way.
I can't edit that. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go through this and edit all of our Trump comments. I don't hate myself that much.
Put it into one separate video, the 5 minutes of Trump edition.
Oh boy.
Won't
Well,
make quite as much sense out of context, but we can do it.
well,
We're not going to, but we
we're
could.
not. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to. If anybody watching, no, no, don't anybody do that. Don't anybody do that. Go do something.
It's like
Go.
you had a thought, and then you very immediately thought better of it.
Yeah.
And you,
Well,
yeah.
just for the sake of anyone just go outside. Enjoy the earth while it's still here. Go outside and just breathe in the air while it's still breathable.
Isn't it terrifying that we can say that and actually be somewhat serious that with one of the other political parties at this point, that is a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
That the world will not be here.
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sake, a president who is trying to release the limitations on asbestos. I mean, for God's sake.
Yeah. It's like you can say, well, you know what, people in our generation, we still have to have practical concerns. We have to worry about how we're going to put our kids through college, but at least our kids won't have to worry about that.
For God's sake, C. Montgomery Burns isn't this cartoonishly supervillainy.
And he built a fucking big disc to block out the sun.
Yeah. He founded Little Lisa Slurry.
I love that episode. Because my favorite part about that is that he genuinely thought he was doing a good thing. He thought Lisa was going to be so thrilled. He was like, I'm recycling.
I'm recycling living beings.
It's made from 100% recycled animals. She says, even when you try to be good, you're evil.
And here we are.
And here we are.
So is there anything else we want to cover on this election at this point?
Oh, I think we've pretty much covered it. Let's just. I think the take-home message is we got probably as good of a result as we could realistically have gotten, and now all we have to do is just hold on and try not to die or have our civilization collapse for 2 more years, and we might possibly be somewhat okay.
We might see our way out of this tunnel
eventually.
Assuming it doesn't cave in on us beforehand.
Yeah. We'll at least have a shot at turning the car around and driving in the right direction. So listen.
Until Trump outlaws steering wheels.
Right. Everybody has to drive in the direction that they're driving. You want to talk about something less dire and depressing for a few minutes before we sign off?
I'd like to. Nothing comes immediately to mind, though.
Have you? I don't know. I'm not sure what you're if you're paying attention or not. But have you been watching the short treks that the Star Trek Discovery has been releasing?
No, in fact, I didn't even know they existed until your Facebook status a day or two ago, which I'm going to have to go and look for them.
Yeah. They're what they're doing is the producers of Discovery, because Star Trek Discovery's second season starts in January, but for the rest of the year, they're releasing these short, like 15 to 20 minute little mini episodes once a month for the rest of the year as a scam to get you to subscribe to CBS All Access. And it worked. It worked because I did. And the first one was about centered on Tilly, who was one of my favorite characters from the show, and I love Tilly. I would watch an episode that was just Tilly like quietly reading a book and not doing anything else. I would be riveted because I think she's terrific. And it was okay. It wasn't like great, but it was okay. It was like, okay, fine, that's good. For like a space filler until the show comes back, it was acceptable.
Yeah, that was acceptable filler material because you're not pretending it's anything else.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, exactly. It was like 15 minutes, and it was like, and you could tell that it's done on a very tight budget. That they don't have, it's not like a cast of thousands. It's just their pre-existing sets. And, it's just sort of, let's just do something until the show comes back. And now it was fine.
We'll set up a couple of lights. We'll get the camera rolling. We'll bring in 3 actors and we'll do a thing.
Exactly.
Without any special effects. It's just people talking, but we'll do a thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually kind of charming. It's sort of like very, very low rent Star Trek being done by the actual people who make Star Trek, because they're like, we don't really want to spend any extra money on this, but we want to do something. So
it's like what the top level fan films were until Axanar came along and tried to do the $1 million budget.
Exactly. Until Axanar ruined it for everybody.
Right.
And that is a hill I will die on. It was Axanar's fault. I'm sure Axanar would have been great. I'm sure the fan film itself would have been terrific, but it was Axanar's fault. But anyway,
I agree.
There was but the second one came out last week, and that one was really, really great. I mean, it wasn't just like a nice little time filler. It was fantastic. It was called Calypso, and it starred. It had a very interesting premise. It still took place on Discovery. It took place on the ship, but the ship, for reasons that are never entirely explained, when we open the story, the ship has been sitting sort of in a nebula by itself, empty, for 1,000 years. So it starts like 1,000 years in the future for Star Trek. And there's a guy on it all by himself who is sort of the ship is now being operated by an artificial intelligence that was given orders 1,000 years ago to hold position whenever the crew abandoned ship for reasons, again, that are never explained. So this artificial intelligence has sort of been holding the ship for 1,000 years all by itself. And then this escape pod with one occupant kind of floats by, and the ship grabs it in a tractor beam and pulls it in and nurses the occupant back to health. And it becomes this sort of miniature, like 20-minute love story between this artificial intelligence and Kraft, the guy who is in the escape pod. And it's just beautiful. It's so well done. And again, it's 20 minutes. It's kind of it doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the show other than the fact that it takes place on the ship. It's totally removed from the events of the series. The fact that how the ship got there is never explained, but it's really, really lovely, and I was really, really impressed and surprised by it. So if anybody is a Star Trek fan and you feel like dropping like a CBS All Access subscription or torrenting it or stealing it or whatever, check out Calypso, because I was very, very impressed with it.
Yeah, the standalone is not a bad thing. I mean, the serialized, you can do more intricate things with stories, with series, but standalone is not a bad thing, and it allows you things like this can allow you to fill in cracks that you don't have time to do especially in a serialized show, without kind of disrupting the flow of the serial.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the sort of story that might be told in like the annual of a comic book series. Because it didn't have a lot. It had nothing to do with the ongoing events of the regular series, but it was still very much. It was obviously part of that franchise. But it felt a lot like that. Like if you did like the Star Trek Discovery comic book annual, and you have the freedom to tell whatever story you want as long as it's tethered somewhat to the main line. It was really nice.
At the same time, is not required to see for the main line.
Yeah,
you can't guarantee.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not. I can't imagine that character will ever appear on the regular series. I mean, I'm sure it's Star Trek. They could contrive some way. He flew through a time portal right after he left. I mean, you could if you wanted, but yeah, I can't imagine it'll
why
come
would
back.
You?
Yeah,
it's one of the things that there wouldn't be, other than a familiar face to people who actually watched that, which is not the majority of the people who are watching Discovery anyway.
Yeah.
There's not much beyond it. Seeing the familiar face is the biggest gain you get from it, and
yeah. But it was really lovely, and it was.
There are reasons certain characters are supposed to be one-off ancillary characters or one-off characters, and you're not supposed to see them again.
Yeah, and I mean, because
fine.
even when Next Generation found excuses to bring back Tasha Yar, it was never really her. Once they killed Tasha, they were like, okay, she's dead. And then okay, well, this is her from an alternate timeline. Okay, well, this is her daughter, who somehow looks exactly like her, even though she's supposedly half Romulan.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, whatever.
Even when a parent and a child look very, very similar to the point where they can be like mistaken for each other, they're not identical.
Don't you love? I love the Quantum Leap episode where he leaps into his own great-grandfather in the Civil War, and they look exactly alike. And it's like, okay.
No, they didn't. They didn't. It was a different actor in the
Was it a different actor? I thought they looked.
Yeah.
I thought they looked.
They claimed that they. No, it was worse. They claimed that there was a genetic.
Oh, that was it.
Genetics, I think, even though
that was
different.
That was it. Yeah, that explained how he was able to leap outside of his own lifetime, because the genetics. Like, okay, but that's his great grandfather. Like, he only has at most an eighth of his genetics are due to this guy.
And it was one of those things where it was such a technobabble thing. It's like Sam starts explaining the similar, the relation, and I was like, oh, you mean like some sort of genetic transference? And Sam's like, yeah, something like that. And then they just barge on without going any further.
They should have.
Later on, Al comes in and they said they did a genetic test and congratulations, you're your great grandfather. Like, what?
I mean, they should have just had Al like look at the comlink and go, yeah, Ziggy doesn't know, and then just move on. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's messed up, Sam. Ziggy doesn't know, Sam. It's my Dean Stockwell.
It's not especially good.
Sam.
It's got like the whiny New York accent in it. Somehow.
Yeah, Dean Stockwell would be incredibly insulted.
Yeah.
If I meet Dean Stockwell at a convention and I'm like, hey man, I love you. I'm a huge fan. Love your work. I do an impression of you. Sam. Gushy sesame on Sam.
That's definitely a Bronx accent you got.
Yeah, there. It's not. It's not.
It's not
good.
Stockwell.
It's not good. No, it's not good.
And as much as there was time when people were like, let's bring Quantum Leap back, let's do it again. I'd like, you know what? No, let's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they talked about doing, like 20 years ago now, they were talking about doing 15, 20 years, they're talking about doing a spin-off series on Sci-Fi, and it even had an IMDb page for a little while, like Quantum Leap, A Bold Leap Forward, or some terrible title like that.
Yeah.
And they talked about having, Al was still going to be the hologram, where they're going to have a different leaper instead of Sam, like possibly his daughter or something. I don't know what the whole
I remember
was.
reading something, that was supposed to be Sam's daughter, but yeah.
But I don't think that you could actually, I don't think you'd do that now. I don't think you'd want to. You couldn't bring, I don't think Dean Stockwell could actually do a regular show that demanding anymore. Because, I mean, the fact he's like 87. He was born in 36, so that makes him what? He's like 82 now.
Yeah.
I don't think he could do a full-time TV show anymore.
Yeah, just let Dean Stockwell rest.
I just pulled up IMDb, and he doesn't even have an acting credit since 2015. So I think he may be retired.
Yeah,
at
and
this point.
that was an NCIS episode, wasn't it?
I did one thing since then.
Oh, okay, he did one. Yeah, I know he did an NCIS episode because he had to do. He has to guest star on all of Scott Bakula's new shows. We demand that. We demand that Dean Stockwell guest star on Scott Bakula's shows.
And then there's something above it called Entertainment, an episode called he played the Celebrity's Henchman.
Okay.
What? Yeah, but yeah, he did NCIS. I'm just looking at here. He did up to 2009, and then he has a couple in 13 and 14, and then one in 15, and that's it. Okay. So basically, he's been mostly retired for a decade. You wouldn't bring him back to do a full-time role. I don't think he physically could at this point.
No.
Nothing against him. I loved him in that role. He was fantastic. He and Bakula had such incredible chemistry.
Yeah.
It was fabulous together.
But yeah, I mean, they didn't even bring back David Hasselhoff for a full-time role in the new Knight Rider. And I'm sure Hasselhoff would have been up for it. Let's just say that. I'm sure he would have said yes if they had said, "Hey, do you want to be in this more?" "Oh yeah, I would love to be in it. I would love to be in it." So yeah, I don't think Dean Stockwell is going to be up for playing Al like on a weekly basis.
Yeah, but and I haven't watched the show in like forever. You've said that it's one of those things that it has a lot of episodes where you say it's well-meaning, but it just doesn't hold up anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's sort of like we're talking about MacGyver. They meant well, but
yeah, exactly. It's a lot like MacGyver. I think I like Quantum Leap for a lot of the same reasons that I like MacGyver, because it's an incredibly goofy show. It has a good heart. It has good intentions. It works for the most part because it has very likable, charismatic actors playing the lead characters that, like, at a certain point with Quantum Leap, you don't even care what he's doing. It's just like, you just like Sam. You want Sam to succeed at whatever he's doing. It's like, what is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to get the parents back together? Okay, sure, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even matter. And the same thing with MacGyver. It's like, he's supposed to rescue the guy that the Russians kidnapped? Sure, okay, whatever. They locked him in a closet with some toothpicks, and he's going to figure out how to get out. That's what you're there for, and that's.
And he's working in the neighborhood, and then he's doing international espionage, and then he's dealing with space viruses. It's just
yes. Can I just say, speaking of revivals, I think we mentioned last time I watched a couple episodes of the MacGyver reboot back
Yeah.
when it started, and it was okay, but it really wasn't for me. Like I just
Hmm.
didn't
Yeah.
feel compelled to watch any more of it. But good luck, whatever. You know what I mean? Like best of luck to the new MacGyver. I think it's still on. I think it got renewed. But
Yeah. Apparently, they turned Pete Thornton. It was they had like a Patricia Thornton,
yeah, yeah,
and then
and
they made her a bad guy.
oh, I didn't
She's
know
off the
that.
show.
She was a good guy when it went in the first couple episodes.
Midway through the first season, it was real that she was working with what Hit or
Oh boy.
Murdoch or something, and so she only did 13 episodes, and she was the bad guy and is gone because, you know, like, I don't know.
But and then
I really don't.
they made Jack Dalton into like an ass kicking secret agent, which is like hilarious if you remember the original show. But, but
It's like you've taken a completely different character and just put an old name on it.
that's actually what it felt like. I mean, I only watched the pilot and the second episode, but so I don't know where it's gone since then. But it really felt like they just, and I think actually that's kind of what they did. They had what became Jack Dalton in the original pilot, or I guess the presentation, was he had a different name, and then they changed his name to Jack Dalton for the series, and it's not really, other than the fact that he's best friends with MacGyver, like there's no connection to the original Dalton at all. But a couple years ago, I guess it's probably been about 10 years ago now, Richard Dean Anderson played MacGyver in a series of short films that were commercials for like a car or something. It was like commercials for a car company. And I
I
think
remember a credit card commercial.
yeah, I remember that one, but there was another one. I think it was for an Australian car company because, like, and Richard Dean Anderson in Australia is like David Hasselhoff in Germany. Like he's like king of the fucking country. Everybody loves him. So he did this series of, I think it was like 4 to like 10-minute episodes or something that they released online, and they were like commercials for this car. And he played MacGyver, and it was MacGyver, and then it was MacGyver's daughter. And I thought as I watched them, it was just good enough that I thought, I would totally watch this if it were a real show. Like if it was like middle-aged old MacGyver and his 20-something daughter, and they were like getting in adventures together, like I would watch the hell out of that show. It's never going to happen, but
Somewhere now too.
yeah, who knows? Yeah, it's another long lost girl. It's like Captain Kirk having David. It's like, oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, I was deeply in love with your mother. you know, I had a kid the whole time, and I just never mentioned it to anybody. you know. But yeah, it was a situation like that.
Oh boy, I think we're pretty much at the point where we should be letting it
Yeah.
go here because we're over an hour and a half.
We're over 90 minutes, and we're talking about fucking MacGyver, so I think it's time
and
to
commercials for MacGyver and car commercials.
it's time to wrap it up. Okay, so
We went from the election and the future of the human race to MacGyver and car commercials. We rock.
Richard Dean Anderson reprising MacGyver for a commercial.
We're versatile.
Yeah, exactly. We're much like the show MacGyver itself. We just take whatever's in front of us and we invent something out of it.
And if we don't have that, we just steal something much more popular.
Exactly.
And turn it into an episode.
Exactly.
The Italian Job, the Andromeda Strain, the In-Laws.
Yeah.
Nothing sacred.
Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
which was really cutting edge because I think they did their Silence of the Lambs episode before the movie even came out. So somebody must have read the book. Like somebody on the MacGyver writing staff must have read the book and said, "We got to rip this thing off."
They did not have a lot of original ideas.
No.
They used all their originality for the MacGyverisms.
Yeah, and after like 3 seasons, they kind of ran out of those too. And they were like, "Okay, one invention per show. We can't keep thinking of this shit." He's like inventing 5 different things by the time the second act is over. We can't keep up this pace. All right, so let's open the doors and let the viewers go. Go back to your lives. Go back to your lives. Go outside. Enjoy the sunshine before it gets too hot and it's too dangerous. I mean, and depending on what part of the world you live in.
November is not the time to talk about the sun getting too hot because we're
That's
getting
true.
into the colder time of year. Yeah.
Well, all of our friends in the southern hemisphere,
Go out there.
enjoy your summer.
Go out there and enjoy the outdoors before the air hurts your face.
There you go. Or if you happen to live in California, don't go outdoors. I mean, unless you have to flee. In that case, please just follow the instructions of your government and do whatever you have to do. But
And Trump is blaming the fires on irresponsible forest management, even though it's a federal oversight thing. You know what he probably means? He means clear cut it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. That's what they all want to do with that. That's why they want to be allowed to lease more public land to private developers. Because all they see is exploitable resources. They have no they don't comprehend why people might want to preserve a beautiful natural space for animals and for people to visit, to just have a nice place to go to be with nature. They don't understand that. I remember Rush Limbaugh once said, and when I think about this, I feel such deep shame that I ever listened to him as a credulous member of his audience. He once said, and I think he said it a bunch of times. It's one of his phrases that he said a bunch of times. He said, the most beautiful thing about a tree is what you do with it after you cut it down. What a monstrous, awful attitude. I mean, what kind of a sick bastard would, really? You see no value in a tree other than what you can use its wood for once you chop it down? Like, that's the only thing. That's it.
To be fair, he and conservatives have similar opinions about, say, women. So
yeah, that's true. They're just an exploitable resource, Yeah. But anyway, we should have stopped when we were talking about MacGyver. We went on too long, and I got to Rush Limbaugh, and now I'm angry again. You know who would hate Rush Limbaugh? MacGyver. He would hate Rush Limbaugh.
As much as he hates anything.
That's true. He is kind of soft-hearted. For a guy who's seen so much death and war, he's kind of a softie.
All right. Well,
anyway,
go.
Let's go.
Is this the third time we've said we should go?
Yeah. So now it's definitely time.
Yeah, third time's a charm.
Thank
you for watching. We appreciate it. We appreciate the comments on the video and what feedback we get.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you have something constructive or nice to say, please leave a comment. If you have something, mean or irrelevant to say, go ahead and leave a comment too, and I'll just delete it before anybody sees it.
And that's the plan.
All right.
Shives is a man with a plan.
That's my plan. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next month, where I don't know. We'll talk about Christmas or some shit. I don't know.
We talked about Christmas last December, so we might need to come up with something. We can talk about We can talk about New Year's.
Oh, now you're talking pre-New Year's.
Completely different thing.
We'll make our New Year's resolutions, and then we can come back in January and talk about how quickly we broke them.
Okay. Yeah. New Year's resolution: I'm never going to drink again.
It felt good to make the resolution, though. It feels good to set a goal. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Later.